sometimes when I'm having a hard time motivating myself, I'll think of the Shaolin monks, and I'll be like, if they can stay isolated and self-disciplined and be perfectly fine for years and years, then I can do this one boring thing for 5 minutes. What I don't think about is them being like, hey, you should beat up some children. So just to offset comments about me not understanding Asian culture or things like,
Baka fucking gaijin, go back to your stupid hamburger.
Unfortunately, you can get all the strict parts of a stereotypical Asian upbringing without even living there or knowing the language firsthand. So I was looking up some stuff about the monks and I found this YouTuber called Ranton. He made some videos about his experience at the Shaolin Temple and they've gotten millions of views. And at first he seemed cool, but I noticed some things that seemed kind of short-sighted and some things that were, let's say, concerning. So when it comes to the temple in general, he's like,
if there's one thing I enjoy, it's fact-checking people on Shaolin-related content.
But he also says,
I'm sure of it. Some of these monks carried the true legendary skill and ancient wisdom of a Shaolin warrior.
Ah, yeah, the ancient wisdom of parkour. This book about the arts of Shaolin says you can learn the skill of weightlessly resting on a branch, like a butterfly or a bee. But you don't even need a stick. You can use a whole other dude. So what mythical techniques did he learn?
They start to do the complete brain annihilation technique. That's the name I have given to it. This is Torcha. The master sneaks up behind you, grabs you under your arms, and starts to sit down on your butt. You can only scream. Actually, you can't scream because then you will get slapped. You can't get up. You cannot move your legs. You cannot move your arms. You can barely move your head. It's
okay.
Before, I got beaten by my master only on rare occasions if I really messed something up. Now it was almost a daily occurrence and 10 times harder. They know that in the West, we're not big fans of using violence to teach. But, my god, there were some masters who just didn't care, which I loved. It made me feel even more integrated.
Yeah, I love getting beaten up just so I can feel included.
The rule is basically, if you're not dead, you can train. If there's nothing clearly and visibly wrong with you, you can train.
The Shaolin Temple is and probably always has been a turbulent place. Over the past years, it's grown vastly in popularity, fame, but also criticism. Now this video isn't going to address those, because they're mostly uttered by people who are neither familiar with Chinese culture, nor have they ever stepped foot into Shaolin Temple as anything other than a tourist.
I see they're really employing those no ego Buddhist principles there. He also said,
I am very grateful and also a tiny bit proud that I made it through these years unscathed.
right after he described,
I think my master once almost broke my back Bane style when he was stretching me, and I will never forget the day because that was, I think, the worst pain I've ever experienced. Unscathed, I was screaming. That was bad. Stretching pain is a different kind of pain. It breaks a lot of people. It broke me. It's unscathed, and it's the only stretching exercise, I think, where I've ever cried. Unscathed.
let's see some other examples of people who have been to the temple and left unscathed. A mark on his forehead shows where a metal bar came crashing down on his skull. Wait, hang on. Is this not a post-mortem car crash report? His forearms have been sliced repeatedly by razor-sharp knives, and his left arm has a punishment burn from boiling water. Eesh. You know, the American way would be suing someone over that. But then there's this other monk who was asked, what method is used to teach the children to train properly? Harsh words can scar a person for life. Physical punishment is usually forgotten within a few days. But on his website, he says, on the average day, I would get whacked by the teachers around 6 times. But that's not too bad. Some boys got whacked more than 10 times. Yeah, I know that when I forget something, I count the average number of times that it has happened, especially if it started happening when I was 8. There's an American called Matthew Polly who wrote a book about his own experience in the Shaolin Temple, and it happened in the 90s, so not much has changed between him and Ranton's time at the temple. They both say the same thing. They're basically forced to do the splits. But it wasn't the pain as much as the fact that we were objects of amusement for the other monks that infuriated me. The younger monks would sit down and hold their breath until we started begging for mercy and then laugh and laugh. One of my friends explained that the monks weren't laughing at us so much as laughing at the memory of when they had been beginners, and their coaches had made them scream and beg for mercy. Ha ha ha. Which reminds me of a short account of something similar from Ranton.
I arrived there and the guy was next to me. He was walking next to me with a stick, looking at me like this and laughing at me like, what are you? You should go back home. You can do nothing. You suck. And I was there like, I can't do this anymore. It was crazy. It was so much fun, but also horrible.
That doesn't sound like very compassionate Buddhist behavior to me. In my experience, someone laughing at you while you're experiencing excruciating pain doesn't contribute to personal growth. My mom has done that too. But it's not just an Asian culture thing. It's straight up bullying, even if you wear traditional orange robes and call yourself a monk while you do it. Oh, and speaking of injuries and not talking about them, there is one technique we know about. It's called Iron Head, where you just headbutt a wall, just a little bit, every day. Just a minor increase in the ever likelier possibility that you'll die of dementia.
And it's not out of the question that you might have a very minor case of serious brain damage.
It's necessary to reject all extraneous thoughts, so that peace and tranquility would reign in the head. Yeah, don't think about the fact that you might be giving yourself brain damage because your skull doesn't have enough skull on it yet.
Don't be alarmed, all right? Although if you do feel alarm, try to hold on to that feeling, because that is the proper reaction to being told that you've got brain damage.
But even if you have more skull on top of your skull, that doesn't make you invincible from concussions, because assumedly you have all the things you need for them. A skull and a brain plus force. And when you get to a certain level with this technique and you finally killed enough brain cells to no longer care about anything that happens to you,
The kind of people that got hit in the head so much they're not afraid of pain.
you can break bricks over your extra skull, ram into other people without a conscience. To write a bit more of Matthew Polly's book, he says all the Ironhead practitioners had knots on their heads and spoke with stutters. Maybe this is a huge leap and a completely unreasonable conclusion to jump to, but brain damage is one of those injuries that I assume would be ignored because...
If there's nothing clearly and visibly wrong with you, you can train.
Oh, also, I wanted to point out that you were sick, but you did get treated for it.
I had some sort of abdominal muscle soreness, and it went on for a whole month. Then everyone just told me, suck it up, it's not a big deal. And I kind of believed them. I kept going, and it just got too bad. When I went back to Germany in 2016, I went to see all kinds of doctors, and nobody really knew what was wrong with me.
So you had to leave to get treatment, which I don't understand because according to Matthew Polly and Google Maps, and this one other monk guy, there's a perfectly good hospital right there. So I'm confused why you didn't talk about going to that hospital first. I mean, it's not like you were in a cult or anything that would only keep you there as long as you were useful to them or paying them money or something, you know. I'm sure you could have left whenever you wanted.
Ultimately, my goal was training side by side with the monks, but those guys have been doing Kung Fu since they're little 6-year-old kids. In some cases, even earlier.
You always have some sort of pain or some sort of muscle soreness or aching somewhere, right? Maybe you fell down or you overstretched or you got hit. This is normal. This is the status quo.
This is being done to children. Children as young as 5 or 6 years old.
今年5岁了，我今年6岁了。
看到你师傅害怕吗？
It's crying, screaming children and young adults being threatened and beaten up and completely emotionally neglected, isolated miles or even countries or oceans away from their parents and from love and affection, so that maybe one day their parents can think, oh, thank God, it was all worth it, and they're a famous movie star or a cool martial arts teacher or a proud circus elephant, theater performer.
关系, as it's called in Chinese, this is the connections and the relationships between people, is so crucially important and difficult to navigate, especially if you're not born and raised in that culture. 关系 prevents everybody from calling out certain inappropriate behavior,
Certain inappropriate behavior.
or shady deals happening behind the curtains, because you never know who the person you want to call out has a good relationship to, and then that might backfire on you. After like 1.5 years, it got to a point where I decided to stay away from most of it. My last year was also my most lonely year, but that was kind of a loneliness chosen by me. I just try to either train or sleep or eat or just be in my room.
So you tried to fraternize with them homies, and then it sucked so much that you isolated yourself within isolation so that you wouldn't get blacklisted by the only social contacts you had access to. Got it. Shaolin Temple, not a cult. Woo! Okay, real talk, Ranton. I know you've said that you can be a feely person.
It's hard to admit it, but I'm a very emotional, a very sensitive person, I think.
But I think this goes for anyone who's gone through something like that. So what I'm hearing is some part of you would definitely like acknowledgement for how difficult and painful this was, because you didn't get that at the time. And you're making jokes about it.
Why you perform on this level, but then perform on this level?
Not like crying like hardcore crying, but like sad boy crying, Instagram crying. So sit down on your butt. You have to take it or leave.
But you're also describing it in a lot of detail, and you're not the first to call it torture.
Shaolin torture techniques. Torture.
It's funny that all of you said that about being forced to do the splits, because that is a form of Chinese torture. Despite his own experiences with this, he's literally advocating a torture technique for other people, or he has done this to kids.
If you saw what I saw, how they stretch kids in the temple, if I had video footage of that, I think most people would call it child abuse, because we've had people in the temple, foreigners, who saw that and then tried to intervene, which is totally unacceptable, of course, because you can't come to the temple and tell them how they should do their job. I saw this video of cheerleaders getting pushed down into splits and crying and yelling, please stop. It's not clear from the video alone whether that's abuse or not, because stretching is painful. People cry and scream during stretching.
Well, hopefully 650,000 yoga teachers in the States alone would beg to differ, but okay, could be wrong. Okay. Okay.
I remember that when I was teaching people in the temple, some of them had safe words because stretching is painful. Of course you should be careful, but that's just how it is.
Oh, my bad. I thought it was just because they were literally being tortured. So if that's just how it is, and it's pretty normal, and it's not abuse, why couldn't I find any videos of these kids not being abused? Why didn't you take any footage of you teaching those kids to prove that it's not a problem?
Every monk has a phone, and my master even told me that I have to have my phone with me at all times.
The monks do have a lot of media experience. Camera teams are there at least every month.
The other monks live stream what they want people to see. You spend how many hours training every day? There are a million tourists there. There are a bunch of people training all the time. Some of them are children.
When the cameras are off, there's only beatings and yellings.
Something else I don't understand is why it's so completely necessary to force someone to do the splits as soon as possible.
Then thanks to my master's stretching routine, I was able to get into splits within about 1 month.
When they're planning on spending years in training.
I was here indefinitely, and it was hard for people to understand that.
Let's go back to this clip real quick.
I have to have my phone with me at all times because he has to be able to reach me if there's a performance.
The only thing you need to be ready for at all times isn't war. It's performing for a bunch of tourists.
It was important to be ready to perform in front of a large audience at a moment's notice.
You really don't lose anything from lengthening the training routine. Unless, of course, the temple just wants to bring in as much money as they can as quickly as possible.
Training at the temple is not free. Now they call it donations, make of that what you will. Because of set relationships, you never know who has what kind of deals with who is getting ripped off, who is paying how much to who.
Ah yes, a lesser known branch that so many monks now peacefully rest on. Capitalist Buddhism. It's really hard to keep all your affairs in order when you get at least $400 to $900 a month from like 500 different people, and you don't have to pay for running water.
Of course, we didn't drink water straight from the tap. We bought it in these little supermarkets in the village.
Or separate sleeping accommodations, or any air conditioning or heating. I don't know what I'd spend that money on, guys. I don't know. Marketing? To get more money? To make sure more kids get beaten up? That's ridiculous. Let's do it. The second noble truth of Buddhism says suffering and sorrow are caused by attachment and craving. So if you get rid of that need, you get rid of suffering. However, this guy, nicknamed the CEO Monk, he's the guy who oversees the temple. There are various different headlines about him, and money, and possessions. As the temple's prestige grew, so did Yongshin's luxury lifestyle, to the extent that he was given a car worth $145,000 for his services to tourism, and bought a cloak made with gold thread valued at around $23,000. $1,000. With regards to the car, he said, "I will try my best to promote martial arts to the world in an attempt to boost local tourism. The local government gave me a present of a car to encourage me to work better. I dream of getting a bigger prize next year." He's so religious. It's funny how he's called the CEO monk. Looks like there are two profiteering bald psychos to watch out for. The temple really needs your money. They're really hurting you guys. Despite the fact that they've survived perfectly well for 1,500 years. They can spend that money for necessities for tourists, like 2 toilets that cost $430,000. Yeah, I couldn't find any pictures of the toilets. I could only find this one TripAdvisor review. An okay experience. There was only one bathroom in the area that was called a 5-star restroom, but it was a fake, and it charged you real money. Ranton, I'm Asian, you're Asian, you like dogs, I like dogs. We're not so different, you and I. Except for being complicit in kids getting beaten up.
These kids that come to the temple at a young age, they get stretched into the splits hardcore. This is torture.
I really think if any animal was subjected to the same treatment Ranton was, namely his dog Bruce.
He was the kindest and most loving dog I've ever met in my life. One of my best friends that I made at Shaolin, Bruce.
I imagine he'd call it animal abuse.
I got beaten by my master if I really messed something up.
No matter how effective it was.
This is extremely effective, and it's extremely effective.
And their teaching methods were insane but undoubtedly effective. We learned in 2 weeks what people in the West learn in 2 years, because it was literally beaten into us.
Bruce wouldn't understand why you would want to hit him, but he'd know it hurt. Kids who were shipped off to this place when they're 3 years old don't understand either. I actually found some extra footage of treatment of the kids at the temple that I don't think they'd want you to see.
Do you want a dog? Do you want a dog?
Ranton doesn't say yes or no to whether or not he recommends forced stretching.
This is kind of the Chinese way, because the best will automatically rise to the top and the quote-unquote weak will break, and it doesn't really matter. I also believe that some people do need individualized help and a more personalized approach. I want to talk about whether I would recommend that you stretch like this. The answer is no. Kind of. Maybe.
Which doesn't directly condemn their actions. I think one huge fallacy that Ranton is missing here when he talks about the Chinese way is that it's not solely the Chinese way. There are tons of videos of little kids in gymnastics classes or taekwondo classes being stretched the exact same way as he was. It's also in the ballet world, unfortunately, and they're not going to go into battle anytime soon. The reason why I'm not targeting those specific sports is because, at least with the other sports, you have the option of going to another school to get a teacher who isn't going to torture you. That isn't an option with the Shaolin Temple.
You have to take it or leave. It's for your own good, because the master does not always care. At the Shaolin Temple, they don't have the patience, nor the culture, nor the interest to look after your personal sensibilities.
Being a Shaolin monk doesn't make you special. It doesn't make you special to have to go through all of this pain just to perform. It just makes you part of a cult that tells you it's important.
What would you do if there was a child right in front of you, sitting all alone, crying in pain from
Shaolin torture techniques.
With your donation, you can help 3-year-olds and people like Ranton not understand that what happened to them was abuse. Because China #1.